But in accordance with the resolution agreed to earlier, I call the Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy Speaker. It's a great privilege to provide the summing up to these Repeal Day bills that we have been debating today. The Omnibus Repeal Day Bill, the Amending Acts 1970 to 1979 Repeal Bill, the Statute Law Revision Bill. Can I thank the members on this side of the House, the member for Robertson, the member for Swan, the member for Grey, the member for Ford, the member for Bradfield, the member for Dobell, the member for McPherson, the member for Mitchell, the member for Macquarie, the member for Durack, the member for Hughes, the member for Lyons, and the members of the Deregulation Committee on the Coalition side, the members for Reid, Bass, Ryan, Deakin, Hindmarsh and Pearce, because in every case the members on this side of the House gave constructive, gave concise and gave comprehensive speeches about why deregulation is important for the future of this country and the health of our economy. Because we on this side of the House know that cutting red tape matters. It matters to the lives of individuals, to the lives of families, to the lives and work of small businesses, and of course to the lives and the operation of the not-for-profit sector. Because the Amending Acts 1970 to 1979 Repeal Bill will actually make the accessibility of our law easier. The Statute Law Revision Bill will improve the usability and the accessibility of our legislation. And the Omnibus Repeal Day Bill we'll see, just like the Commission of Audit had tasked us to do, we'll see the abolition of bodies that no longer are required. The Fishing Industry Policy Council, the Product Stewardship Advisory Council, the Oil Stewardship Advisory Council will all now be abolished.
How will we survive without them?
We will also ensure that we can modernise the ability of ACMA to publish their changes using online services by amendments to the Broadcasting Services Act. We'll ensure that fuel suppliers and producers from around this country will now no longer have to go through the additional requirement of submitting an extra annual report to the Department of Environment, given that they are already putting in monthly reports. We ensure, as we heard from the member for Robertson, that the aged care sector processes will be streamlined thanks to the great work of the member for Menzies and the minister who is sitting at the dispatch box here, because he has ensured that key personnel, when they're changed among the many aged care providers in this country, do not require a phone call to the federal department to say that a nurse has been hired or fired. Last year there were 10,000 such calls. Now we'll no longer need that red tape paper requirement. Mr Deputy Speaker, these are significant changes in just these three bills which we are bringing on for debate, and a vote right now. But they are just a small part of the more than 400 individual measures that we have outlined as part of our Repeal Day process, with the first Repeal Day in March and the second now on October the 29th. The headline number, the achievement that the member for Watson hates to hear, is that we have been responsible for $2.1 billion worth of compliance savings. From agriculture to education, from health to human services, from trade to treasury, we have been responsible for significant red tape cuts right across the economy. And it matters. And it matters, and that is why groups like ACCI, the Business Council of Australia, Universities Australia, the Australian Industry Group, Minerals Council of Australia, that is why they have applauded the Coalition for taking deregulation seriously. Because those opposite, despite the pious words from the then member for Griffith, who told us that red tape was out of control, you did nothing on your side of the House. You did nothing but twiddle your thumbs and give us 21,000 additional regulations, tying up the small business people of Australia in red and green tape. And now you have the shame you have the shame and the hide to come into this place and to criticise us for making important reforms. Because on the one hand you say, these are trivial, these are part of the normal course of business, this is fixing punctuation, full stops and commas. But then on the other hand, the member for Fraser goes out in print in the Australian saying, oh, you're taking away important protections in the financial services sector, or you're making some important changes which we don't like in the charities and not-for-profit sector when we're getting rid of duplication. You can't have it both ways. Why didn't you come up with our proposal to streamline the Comcare scheme and to allow companies around Australia who operate in multiple jurisdictions to self-insure under the Comcare scheme? Why didn't you come up with a one-stop shop approval process which has seen Labor states join with coalition states in signing on to our one-stop shops worth $426 million a year in savings? Why didn't you come up with the changes to the Do Not Call register, which will see more than 9 million Australians no longer have to renew their membership of the Do Not Call register? Why didn't you come up with the changes to the NBN, where we're no longer mandating Australian homes to have actually a big, bulky, expensive battery backup when we know that most Australian homes now have a mobile phone? Why don't you accept that we came up with this first, that we have the stomach and the fortitude to make a change in deregulation where you guys patently failed? In fact, the then Minister for Small Business, Craig Emerson, when he was in government, he said we are taking giant scissors to red tape. Giant scissors. Those giant scissors led to an additional 21,000 regulations.
A giant printing press.
There was a giant printing press. Thank you very much, the member behind me, the minister. Because we have actually made significant changes. And the competitiveness paper, which was released just a couple of weeks ago, had a landmark change in it. And that landmark change was that we will now accept into Australia product systems and services where they have been approved already by trusted international jurisdictions, and with the regulators in this country, whether it's the APVMA, whether it's NICNAS, whether it's the TGA, will only add an extra layer of regulation when there is a proven need to do so. And we had the CEO of Cochlear, Chris Roberts, come out publicly and say this will make a major difference to the operation of his business. And we know, for example, the member for Longman, in his own electorate, when he brought this wonderful example of a company that in Australia produces cricket balls and footballs made out of leather, and they have to bring in a measuring and a cutting leather machine from Italy, but then they have to pay $3,000 for that machine to be accredited. Now, why is that the case? Well, if it's been approved in Italy and Europe as a trusted international jurisdiction, there has to be a very good reason why it can't automatically be brought into the Australian system. Or why does an importer from Europe, again, of commercial cooking equipment that goes to the hospitality and the tourism sectors and the aged care sectors, why do they have to pay $12,000 a machine to get it particularly accredited into Australia? Just an extra layer of cost, which is then passed on to the consumer. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we have come up with a system and new processes to bed down this deregulation agenda. Ministers now have established deregulation units. Ministers have now appointed ministerial advisory committees to advise them on the key areas to cut regulation. We have changed the KPIs for senior public servants to align their best interests with our best interests and the public's best interests, namely in cutting red tape. We've assigned 2 days of the Parliament timetable to just cutting red tape. We've set ourselves a target of $1 billion a year, a net target, a big target. And we're now $2.1 billion, a number that the member for Watson hates to hear.
How much?
$2.1 billion. And we tasked the Productivity Commission to come up with a framework for auditing the performance of the regulators, which have now finalised and was released earlier today. Very significant when we have 150 regulators at both the Commonwealth level, some major ones like the ATO, ASIC, APRA, ACMA, and others much smaller like the Office of Gene Technology or the Passports Office of the like. These are all extremely significant changes. And they're changes that are making people's interaction with government that much easier through the MyGov and the MyTax side. They're making changes in terms of reducing the overall compliance by, for example, and it will be interesting to see whether the member for Watson and those opposite support this bill when it's debated in coming weeks, to the changes to the corporations law, which will allow, which will no longer allow 100 shareholders to call a special general meeting of a company like Woolworths, which has over 400,000 shareholders. But 100 shareholders can still put an issue on the agenda at a major special general meeting, but they shouldn't be allowed to call a special general meeting in itself. A measure which has been warmly received by the business community and will be a test for those opposites to see how job-friendly and business-friendly they really are. Mr Deputy Speaker, I could go on. We have made extremely good progress in just the year when we have been at the helm. And we have got legislation through the Senate and we have banked reforms. Our first omnibus bill went through the Senate. Our changes to the agricultural chemicals went through the Senate. And our changes around the classification went through the Senate, and our changes around the future of financial advice went through the Senate, and we are hopeful to get our one-stop shops through the Senate shortly. We have banked a lot of reforms that we have already announced, but we have still a long way to go. And I want to thank the ministers who in their individual portfolios, for example in job services, have made a very significant reform to ensure that there is less paperwork for job service providers, an incredible reform. And all the cabinet ministers and all the junior ministers and all the parliamentary secretaries who have made extremely significant reforms, we're very grateful to them. And most of all, can I thank the Prime Minister, because the Prime Minister has led this agenda. The Prime Minister himself has taken responsibility for the deregulation agenda by making it a standing item at COAG meetings and driving change with his fellow premiers and chief ministers, but also by ensuring that his ministers and his Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet maintain the momentum that we currently have to cut red tape. And can I also thank the senior members of the public service in the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, in all the deregulation units in the other portfolios, the Office of General Counsel, Parliamentary Counsel, who was responsible for drafting this legislation. Can I thank them? This has been a team effort. This has been a team effort from start to finish, and I must tell you the finish line is a long way away, because the Productivity Commission has estimated that 4% of GDP at least is tied up in red tape and compliance. And Deloitte's put out a report saying 1 million Australians are involved in the compliance sector. Clearly, Mr Deputy Speaker, this is too much. This has to change, and on this side of the House we are determined to do it. So these bills today are extremely important and are just one step along the way by cutting 1,000 pieces of regulation legislation, another 7,200 pages, removing them from the statute books, giving us a headline figure of $2.1 billion if we combine Repeal Day 1 and Repeal Day 2. This is an important day for the Parliament. This is an important day for the families and for the businesses and the not-for-profits of the country and the farmers of this country, who tell us that $1 in every 6 that they take at the farm gate is taken up in compliance. This is an important step in freeing up our economy, ensuring we have higher productivity, growth, innovation, entrepreneurship, and most importantly of all, that we have more jobs for Australians today and into the future. I commend these bills to the House. Yeah.